You know that moment when you need to start something? Maybe it's an email or a project or even just loading the dishwasher, but instead you're frozen. Like your brain is spinning in circles, screaming just to do it, while your body refuses to cooperate, sitting on the couch doom scrolling. That's ADHD task paralysis. And if you've ever been trapped in that stuck feeling, you know how frustrating, actually maddening it can be. Everyone talks about things like breaking tasks down into smaller steps or setting timers, but what if those strategies don't work for you? What if the usual advice still leaves you staring at your to do list like it's written in some alien language? In this episode, I'm sharing two game changing shifts that no one is talking about to get you moving without forcing yourself through sheer willpower. Here's what you'll get from today's episode. One, the real reason your brain locks up and why it has nothing to do with laziness or lack of motivation or even just ADHD. Two, you'll get the two shifts that can help you break free even when you feel completely stuck. And lastly, a practical way to apply these insights right now so you can start moving without the shame spiral. By the end of this episode, you won't just understand your ADHD task paralysis, you'll have the tools to work with your brain instead of fighting against it. Ready to break free? Let's do this. Welcome to the Self Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Task paralysis. This is one of the things I actually hear about the most from my ADHD clients, both in my coaching business and in my therapy practice. And task paralysis is something other people struggle with too, but it's a bit different for those of us with our ADHD brains. And we're going to get into it because there's all kinds of great strategies to be able to move beyond task paralysis. I even shared them in a recent episode. But the problem is if you're not doing these two things that we're going to talk about, those strategies, you're not even going to be able to get yourself to do them. So, first of all, what is task paralysis? It is you have a task to do and you can't get yourself to do it. Now, generally, when I think of task paralysis, I think of someone sitting on their couch doom scrolling, but it could even be avoiding a task by doing a million other things, right? It could be perfecting things. It could be research rabbit holes. It could be never quite feeling ready, which is also another sign of perfectionistic tendencies. But task paralysis can look like a lot of things, but the one I'm talking about right now is when you're having a hard time getting moving, like you're just frozen and stuck. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I want to talk about what is actually happening when that is you. So there are actually two things beyond quote unquote just ADHD that are making this harder, that's keeping you stuck. And that's what I want to get into because you can do all the skills and strategies, but until you work with these two things, you're not gonna be able to use them. So the first one is a dysregulated nervous system. You've heard me talk about this before. I talked about this in our last episode. The shutdown response is one of immobilization to protect, actually. It's a survival response. And we protect by immobilizing. Think about animals playing dead in the wild so that a predator animal doesn't find them interesting anymore and walks away, right? That is what's happening is we are literally feeling almost dead, right? Like there's no movement going on. We might feel disconnected, numb, dissociative. We might feel depressed. It's really hard to get yourself to move at all in this state. So That can be a big piece of what's going on. And the only way to get past that is any movement at all. Because if you're like, oh, I'll try 5 minutes thing. Well, if you aren't, if you're in shutdown, if you're in your shutdown response, your nervous system doesn't think it's safe for you to do that. So you're not going to be able to. So, in order to be able to get out of the shutdown response, also known as the dorsal vagal response, you need any movement at all, even visualizing movement. Even looking out the window can help. So, certainly, if you can get up and go for a walk, by all means. But if you're not able to do that, visualize going for a walk. Look out the window. Look at nature. Maybe even get up, walk and stand outside and breathe the fresh air. You can do volcano breathing, which I've taught in a number of episodes, where your hands are together in front of your heart. And as you inhale, you reach your arms all the way up overhead. As you exhale, they come down around back by your sides and back to center. You can do that several times. Usually I recommend at least 3, but that's a nice way. And you can even do things like place one hand to the side of your face and your other hand on your heart, because that stimulates the ventral vagal response. That stimulates the response where you are, or the state where you are safe enough to connect, rest, and digest, that state of homeostasis. Just know that when you come out of the shutdown response, you might end up in your fight or flight response. So then fluid movement with breath is what you need. And volcano breathing can help that one. There's a whole, oh my gosh, at least half a dozen to a dozen of tools I share for dealing with that in my programs and in my 28-day nervous system regulation challenge that happens every month. But just for now, even volcano breathing, if you get into your fight or flight response. So if you're in that shutdown response, that is what needs to happen, is any kind of movement at all, even visualizing movement. The next piece of this is working with the shame that you carry. And you might not even realize that you carry shame, but if you have any kind of negative self talk going on about being lazy, or how you struggle to get yourself to do stuff, or you're never able to do anything, you're always stuck. If you notice any of that, or any kind of language that implies that you're somehow bad or defective, that is also keeping you stuck because you just don't believe you can do it. So, the next piece, the second piece of this, is working with the parts of you that hold that shame, working with you, working with the parts of you who hold the woundedness that maybe created that shame in the first place from those early messages, the criticism, the correction that you may have received when you were young. It's working through that. And here's the thing, that's some deeper work. It's some deeper work, and it requires some time. And I highly recommend you do that. In the short term, what you can start to do so you don't further that damage is make this mindset shift. ADHD is not a deficit. Yes, we call it a disorder, but the reason it's called a disorder is because it doesn't match societal expectations. It doesn't match the neurotypical expectations of society. But that doesn't mean you are somehow broken. It just means your brain is wired differently. And because the world is designed by mostly neurotypical people for neurotypical people, or by neurodivergent people who then just comply with the neurotypical stuff because that's the way some people choose to get through or get by, then that's why it can feel like a disorder. That's why we can feel like we're so bad or wrong. But the reality is, ADHD in and of itself isn't bad. There's actually a crap ton of awesome things that come from our ADHD. Our creativity, our ability to problem solve, our ability to take in lots of information. Now, granted, we can have trouble filtering information and focusing, but that's only a problem because of the societal expectation that we do it a certain way. And I've talked about this in a recent episode. When you look at historically, ADHD brains were needed in our tribal life, right? Because the ADHDers, we see everything. We take in all this stimuli so that we were the ones who would see the berries we could eat and find and see the danger or see the animal who could keep us warm during the winter, whatever. And that was actually very valuable back in those times. So this is not a new thing. ADHD is not new. It just has become problematic as our society, especially since the Revolution, has been so focused on what productivity has to look like and how you have to get there according to societal quote unquote norms, which are set by neurotypical folks. So the best thing you can do for your brain is shift it, because what you take in is what you will focus on, and what you focus on becomes what you believe. So if every day you are thinking about how disordered you are and how messed up you are and how disabled you are because of your ADHD, guess what? You're going to feel even more disabled and unable to do anything. And I'm not saying it's not hard. I'm not going to get into the whole, but ADHD is a disability. Sure, there are times when you probably might qualify for disability based on your ADHD, although I don't know anyone who's qualified based on that. And sure, because society is not designed for ADHD brains, just like society is not designed with people who need a wheelchair in mind, then for sure we could call it a disability. It qualifies as a disability. It's just that when we think about it from day to day as a disability, then we start to become more disabled. And that's not what we want. It's like pain. I remember I don't specialize in chronic pain, but for a while, when I was in my old private practice in Colorado, I had a lot of people with chronic pain. And I started reading things to figure out, like, how do I help them? Because they just seemed so stuck and they were so focused on their pain. And I'm like, that can't be good. That's got to be fueling it. And it turns out that's true. When you focus on the shitty stuff, when you focus on your pain, when you focus on how hard things are, then things keep being harder. Not because they're not, it's not like your pain goes away, but if all you do is focus on it, it's just going to amplify it, because then that's all you see. Right? It reminds me, this is terrible. I cannot even believe I'm going to share this. But it reminds me when I was growing up, my neighbor friend, her dad, when we would like skin our knee or something. This is so terrible, like so awful to say to a kid. But he's like, I could always rip your arm off and hit you over the head with it, and then your knee won't hurt anymore. And he was kind of kidding. I mean, he was kidding. He wasn't going to rip our arm off. But his point was it was hurting more because we were hyper focusing on it. And he's not wrong. There's been all kinds of studies done to show that when we focus on stuff, that is then becomes more of the reality. And I'm not suggesting we think our ADHD away. I'm not in any way saying that we can think our ADHD away. We have ADHD, and there are certainly things that are going to be hard. But here's what I know. I have lots of clients with ADHD and lots of clients who are focused on recovery and, oh, wow, look, I can do this. And yes, this is hard, but what can I do about it? How can I do this anyway in our society? How can I set it up for myself to work? And they tend to be able to do that. Whereas the people that stay stuck in, I can't because my ADHD is so bad, I just can't even. When we get into that, I find those people get more stuck. And sure, that's anecdotal, but I got to believe there's studies out there that show that, just like with chronic pain, there's studies that show that the more you focus on the pain, the more amplified it becomes. I can even share that this is kind of funny. When I first shifted my niche to be ADHD women entrepreneurs, my ADHD got so much worse. Like all of a sudden, I was just like, holy crap, why is my ADHD even worse than it used to be? And it was because I was talking about it so much. And sure, I do have ADHD and I do have problems with it, but I've got a lot of things figured out that make it not as hard for me. But because I was so focused on it and hadn't figured a way yet to have some distance from what I was sharing, my symptoms got worse for a while, really bad. I don't want to even say bad, because then there's that good bad paradigm. It's a shame, but they got more severe. It got harder to do stuff. Whereas when I'm like, okay, yep, that's just okay, sure, that's an ADHD thing, but I'm still going to do it anyway. Like I'm going to find a way to do this thing I want to do that works for my brain instead of fighting it. That is one of the hugest shifts that you need to make if you're feeling stuck. And it's one that takes practice. You're not going to be able to just say, yep, as of today, I believe you, Jen Barnes. As of today, my ADHD is a neurodivergence. It just means I was born with a brain wired differently than society was created for at this time in history. I just happen to be born here. No problem. Anything that's hard, I'll validate that it's hard and that's okay, and that we're going to figure out how to do it the ADHD way. Sure, that's great, and that's where to work towards. But it's going to take reminders. It's going to be a practice of whenever you catch yourself saying, oh, I can't because of my ADHD, or oh, but my ADHD. And I'm not saying that your ADHD isn't making it harder. All I'm saying is that by focusing on how your ADHD makes it harder, you're making it even harder than your ADHD makes it harder, if that makes any sense. So, how do we apply this? Well, one, when you notice you're stuck, first of all, find a way. What tells you that you're stuck? Can you catch yourself on the couch doom scrolling? I have an app called Screen Zen. And so there's a lot of friction to get into my social media, and a lot of like, it only lets you in for so long because I've got it set up to do that. So if I notice if I'm doom scrolling, I keep getting notifications that I have to re-sign in again, then that tells me, oh, that's come up a couple times. I've been numbing out with doom scrolling. Not what I want to be doing. So that's a way. Or if I'm sitting and sometimes my facial expression, I'll feel different sensations in my body when I'm in that shutdown, numbing out response. And so, what does it look like for you? Because the first thing is to apply the tools to regulate your nervous system out of the shutdown response. You have to even notice that you're in your shutdown response. So, how are you going to notice? Write that down, figure it out, write it down, journal about it. And then when you notice, have some ideas of what you can do to get your body moving. Look outside the window. Some of the strategies I shared earlier, volcano breathing, standing outside in nature and breathing the fresh air, whatever it is, have a list of those by where you tend to numb out. For me, that would be on the couch. I have a little armrest that's got one of those armrest holder things that's got my water in it. And if I had a TV that I was plugged in, I would have remotes there. But instead, I've got like pens and my glasses washer thing and like my fidget toy, stuff like that is there, right? And then my water bottle. But I would put it there for me. Maybe it goes somewhere else for you, but have that list of tools readily available, because as you're getting used to them, you're going to need to remember them. But again, before you can use them, you're going to have to interrupt the behavior. You're going to have to notice that you're doing it, and you're going to have to say, I'm not going to do this anymore, and then regulate. Secondly, it's important to work on your mindset shift that we talked about. So when you catch yourself saying those things, I can't because my ADHD, or oh, it's a bad ADHD day today, I can't. Don't get me wrong, we do have times when our ADHD is harder on our ability to be productive, for sure. And I think it's valid to acknowledge that, but it's the way that we acknowledge that matters. So when you catch yourself saying it in a way that just makes you feel more stuck, see if you can shift it and say, yeah, you know what? My ADHD does seem particularly strong today. And so I'm just going to shift and expect a little less of myself today. That doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It's not a moral judgment. It just means that you're being realistic. So, to really shift how you think about your ADHD and practice shifting that self talk. And I'm just going to tell you, as someone who is an IFS practitioner, I strongly recommend you acknowledge the parts of you that feel that way and validate. I get why you feel that way because I get why you feel that way. I get why there are parts of you that feel like you are disabled because you're ADHD, because society told you you were over and over again in your growing up years. Maybe they didn't use the word disabled, but you were corrected and criticized so many times. Even if you were a over functioning high achiever masker like me, you still got it because well-meaning people were trying to get you to conform into neurotypical society to make your life easier. But what they didn't realize, and what we didn't know because we were kids, is that didn't make our life easier. It just gave us all anxiety disorders And we're just all like, because we're trying to fit into this mold that doesn't fit us. And then we get depressed later because we don't really know who we are and no one really understands us because we haven't been who we are. And I'm not saying your ADHD is all of who you are, but when you mask one thing, you tend to mask everything. And so it can be really hard to feel heard and understood when you're masking that way. Then, after you make these two shifts, after you do this work we've been talking about, now those ADHD strategies to get yourself to do stuff come in. So whether that's I'm just going to do 5 minutes, and if I can only do 5 minutes, that's great. And then that kind of tricks your brain because usually you do more. Or maybe it's you break it down into your top 3 steps or top 3 tasks for the day, and that's in a separate place. So you don't have to look at your long to do list. Like, however you do it, that's when these strategies become effective, is after your nervous system's more regulated and as you shift your brain, your thoughts going on that are telling you that you can't do it because you're messed up. All right, this was a quick one, y'all. I hope it was short and sweet and super helpful. I would love it if you would leave a comment about how this landed for you. And if you're not following already or on YouTube subscribed, please hit that follow or subscribe button. That helps you not miss a single episode so that you're getting ADHD content from someone who really gives a shit about helping you. That's me. I really want to help you with this. So make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button. The other thing it does is it helps me get more views so that other people who need this help also get it. So we're like this ADHD women community helping each other. All right, y'all, take care. I'll see you next time.